Hi, Phil Winder here. Authentication is hard. Asking your LLM to write authentication code is risky because it doesn't know what standards your enterprise implements. It's also wasteful. In this demo, I'm going to show you how CodeIt helps to reduce code and make you more secure. Here we have the typical enterprise setup where we have a shared auth library that all projects must use. This is a helper library that implements secure, reliable and tested authentication helper functions. In this first demo, I'm going to ask a raw AI coding assistant to implement authentication on my billing service. Here's the prompt. It's asking for a basic middleware. I'm not really paying much attention to the spec task this time. I'm just going to ask the agent to implement it. Let's skip forward a bit and let the agent do its work. The key thing to note from the design spec is that it's planning on writing all of the authentication code itself, developing it from scratch. Okay, that's completed. Let's just double check it's created a PR. Yes, it has. Great. Now let's move on to the next demo, in which I'm going to index the authentication repository with Helix Code Intelligence and rerun the exact same task. So I've added the repository. I'm just going to let it index. This will take a few moments. While it's doing that, just a quick recap on what Helix Code Intelligence is. Helix Code Intelligence is a code indexing server. It can index your public and private repositories that the AI coding assistants have not been trained on. This gives AI coding assistants visibility into your proprietary or internal code bases. In general, this reduces duplication because AI coding assistants can reuse code better, and also it makes them more secure. It follows the same patterns that already exist in your other repositories. Now it's finished indexing, let's recreate the exact same task as we did before. Let's take a look at the pull requests. We have two pull requests here, one from the original version and one from the Helix Code Intelligence version. The first thing you'll notice is that in the original task, it's resulted in around 1,200 lines of code. In the Helix Code Intelligence version of the task, it's resulted in about 700 lines of code. So that's already a clear difference. The next thing that I'd like to look at is the actual files that have been touched by the original version. You'll see that the task has imported a few libraries that were unexpected, and it's also touched the domain layer. I don't know why it's touched the domain layer. This was not a domain task, it's a pure infrastructure concern. Now I'm going to recalculate the lines of code for the core authentication implementation. I will ignore all of the test files and all of the supporting handlers to make the comparison fair. We have 171 plus 134 lines of code, which results in about 300 lines of code. Let's take a look at the Helix Code Intelligence version of the implementation. First, we can see that we have imported our internal organizational authentication library, and the design of the code looks a lot simpler. There's fewer files. If we look at the lines of code, then we have 58 plus 39, so that's about 100 lines of code. That's a reduction of 200 lines of code out of 300 in the original. That's reduced it by 2/3. That's 66% less code. Okay, there we are. That was a great example of how Helix Code Intelligence can reduce the number of lines of code that your coding assistants need to write by reducing duplication, but also improve security by using well-tested, established patterns that already exist elsewhere in your organization. In practice, you'll find that the reduction in the lines of code depends on the problem you're working on. If your AI coding assistant is able to reuse a high-level library, then it's very likely it will not need to re-implement the world from scratch. I think the key thing in this demo, though, is the added security layer. You really don't want to be rewriting authentication patterns from scratch each time, because I can almost guarantee that one of those will be wrong. Check out Helix ML for more information. My name's Phil Winder, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, bye-bye.